This is Sydney.
And I'm Sher. And each week we get together to share with you a message of hope.
It is through our own study and our personal experiences that we offer the reminder to not only seek the light,
but be the light. You can find peace, and there is hope.
And as long as one of us is slightly caffeinated, there will be laughter.
Welcome to the summer series,
Part 2,
George Washington.
And we're so glad you're here.
I'm forging my way through the tip top. I'm living my life through the drip drop when eternity.
All right, Sydney, today we're going to talk about George Washington.
I looked up some basic information because I was so scared that you were going to ask me like, hey, which coin is he on? So I was like, which coin is George Washington on? And I was 85% sure I knew. And I was right.
What is it?
It's the quarter.
It is?
Don't you dare. I just Googled it. I am prepared for that too. I did think to myself that of all of the coins, I'd prefer to be the quarter because kids always want the quarter.
It's true. Quarters are fun.
And then what were they thinking when they gave the penny and the dime and the nickel? Who wants to be on that? But the quarter is solid. So you cannot attack me today. I know basic information. He was the first president.
Oh, that was the question I was going to ask you.
Some people believe there was actually 5 presidents before George Washington.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well,
don't ask me who they are. I Googled one of the names, but I have since forgot. They're like, my grandpa was first.
People like to say that, but George Washington, he was the original president.
He was the original president. He's on the quarter and he's in Hamilton. So I'm prepared.
Thank you for bringing up Hamilton.
He makes an incredible entrance on Hamilton, though, which you'll find out in the summer.
I will, since I haven't seen it yet. I'm excited.
Mm-hmm. And then you'll love American history after.
I know, because I don't love it now. I need to go see Hamilton, so I appreciate it.
But I'm excited to be your student again today. This has been fun for me to learn things and have new words in my vocabulary to impress Ben. I think I'm going to get another year out of that man now that I know so much about the Declaration of Independence. He took me out to dinner and I was like, did you know da-da-da-da-da? And I told him all these things and he was like, wow, woman, you're amazing.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
I didn't even know you were listening. So
I was listening and happy. The tables around us at the restaurant know how much I know too. I impressed everybody.
Were you standing up or just talking
on our
loud?
Table? I was like, give me some more bread and I'll give you some more knowledge of the Independence Day. But I'm excited to be your silent student.
All right. George Washington loved his plantation at Mount Vernon, Virginia. Even though he loved being home and he loved working there, he was often called upon to do things that were definitely not in his best interest. But after each experience, as you read and learn about his life, you can see his testimony of God continue to grow. One of the most dramatic experiences happened to him when he was just in his 20s. He was an officer in the British colonial army. He was part of the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War is sometimes called the 7-Year War, but there's a lot of 7-year wars, so I'm just going to call it the French and Indian War.
Got it. Noted. I feel confident that if it was on a multiple choice question right now, I would answer it correctly now. Thank you. Already learning. My mind is expanding.
Oh, good. I'm so happy. So the French and Indian War was a war between France and Britain, and it was basically who was going to be the world power. And Britain is going to eventually win the war. But I want to talk...
Spoiler alert. You got to warn us.
Sorry, I should have said something. My bad. I'll be better next time. Even though they're going to win the war, I want to talk about a battle that Britain lost. And what happened was the British and the colonial army were marching to attack a French fort. But what they didn't know is the French and their Native American allies knew that the British and the Americans were on their way. And so they ambushed the Americans and the British military in the forest. Out of the 1,300 British and American soldiers that were there, 777 of them were either wounded or killed.
777?
777.
That's a good luck number.
I thought it was a good luck number, but I guess it was lucky for the French.
For the others.
Not for the people who got shot.
Jackpot.
For the French. So 75% of the officers were shot that day, but Washington was the only officer that was not shot off his horse. So because he was able to remain on a horse the entire time, he took over the fighting and the retreat. When he got back to the British fort, he removed his jacket and he found 4 bullet holes in it. Several horses had been shot from underneath him, but he didn't have one scratch on him.
So luck really is perspective.
Yeah.
Not so lucky for those horses, pretty lucky for George Washington.
For George Washington, absolutely. He wrote a letter to his mother, and it said, "I now exist and appear in the land of the living by the miraculous care of Providence that protected me beyond all human expectation." So George Washington knew and recognized God's hand in his protection.
That's an awesome perspective to be given so early. Because if you just truly feel like you're in God's hands, then you just go forward and you do your thing.
And he did. He felt that power, and he did go forward and complete his mission. 15 years after this battle, he went to the ambush area in Pennsylvania, and there he met with a Native American chief that was fighting with the French at the time. The chief had ordered his men to shoot all of the officers first, and Washington was on the horse, and so he was an easy target. The chief, who said he never missed, had personally shot several times at George Washington. After the battle, the chief told his warriors that George Washington would become the chief of nations, and a people yet unborn will hail him as the father of a mighty empire.
Okay, listen.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool quote. But if I was a great warrior and I couldn't make the shot, I would also say something like that just to cover my own butt. I'd be like, I would have hit him, but God is protecting him. And therefore, that's the only reason I missed. I would say that. Because if you're shooting at someone to murder them, then what's a lie?
That's fair.
I know.
That is a very good perspective.
But I still like it, and it's touching.
Well, let's see if you like this one better. Okay. So when Washington met the chief 15 years later at the ambush site, this is what the chief told Washington. He said, "I have traveled a long and weary path that I might see the young warrior of the great battle. I come to pay homage to the man who is the particular favorite of heaven and who can never die in battle. So even his enemies recognize God's hand and protection." Either that, or as Sydney said, he's ready to pull that lie out for 15 more years.
I would be that stubborn. I wouldn't want my people to think that I had a poor shot. So I would go with that.
You're going to track him down and say this to his face 15 years later.
Yes. There is a video where an officer pulls over a man and he is like, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And he said, "Because I was speeding." And the officer said, "Yes, but my wife is having a baby right now. She's in labor." And he goes in and the officer's like, "Huh, okay." So he follows him to the hospital. And this young man whispers to a nurse, "Are there any single moms here?" And he looks over his shoulder and the officer is watching him. And then it goes through the labor and delivery, the first birthday, the graduation, the passing of the mom, and the officer's there the entire time. Then at the very end, he's like, "Okay, I believe you." So it kind of is exactly the same thing.
So it is the same thing. We can go Sydney's route, or you can be like George Washington and the chief that believe that he was protected by God.
I'm just saying what other people are thinking.
And I'm glad you're bringing that perspective. Okay. All right. So Washington's faith and testimony is going to continue to grow when he became the American general fighting against the British in the American Revolution. He and the military were saved by a thick fog that rolled in at the Battle of Long Island. Later, the horrible weather led to a surprise victory over the Hessians at the Battle of Trenton and crossing of the Delaware. He was also guided and directed at Valley Forge to get the army through freezing cold temperatures, and was guided and directed with an early 1700s vaccine idea that saved his army when smallpox was spreading throughout the camp. He also survived the treachery of Benedict Arnold, and there are also so many stories of Washington riding on his horse in front of his troops, even between the firing lines when he was no more than 30 yards away from the British. These stories spread throughout the colonies, and the colonists believed that he was a man that was protected and directed by God.
I'd also like to say I'm seeing a theme that he was protected by his horses over and over as well. So shout out to those horses.
Yeah, those horses, even the ones who gave their life that got shot out from
which
under
apparently
him.
were many.
Yes. Washington knew where our nation's protection came from, and recognizing that God was the only way the colonists would ever be able to defeat the British, Washington sent out multiple orders to the soldiers throughout the war. For example, he wrote, "The general hopes and trusts that every officer and man will endeavor to live and act as becomes a Christian soldier, defending the dearest rights and liberties of his country." He reminded his soldiers why they were fighting. They were fighting to enjoy the rights that God has given all of his children, as explained in the Declaration of Independence. And he also reminded them to follow the example of Christ because Washington understood who our king is. Eventually, the Americans are going to defeat the most powerful military in the entire world. And again, a storm rolled in and made it impossible for the British to escape at the final Battle of Yorktown. After the British surrendered at Yorktown, Congress gathered together at a church to give thanks to God for the victory. On the same day, George Washington sent out a letter to all the American troops. He declared, "Divine service is to be performed tomorrow in the several brigades and divisions." Further, he stated that they should attend with that seriousness of deportment, of gratitude of heart, because of the direct interventions of God.
I love that. It goes hand in hand with what happened in the beginning to me. He saw that he was saved and the only one on the horse. And then he teaches this to those who are under him. You can see, if you look back on your life, specific things that happen that will guide you in the future. And this was a specific thing that was given to him, sadly, by the fall of 777 others. But it was a specific thing that would guide the rest of his life, that you don't need to fear because you're in God's hand and he's going to protect you. So all you need to do is move forward. And like you said, he does do that. And then he teaches others that this is a divine situation. We're in God's hand. We have no reason to fear.
And what a great example and comfort that had to have been not only to our military, but all of the Americans. That had to have been such comfort to know that they were being led and guided by a man of such faith.
Right, because if you're in a situation where the leader is not confident, stressed, anxious, you feel that. And so this is the same on the other end, that he believed in God, he believed in divine intervention, and that's why he led the people the way he did, as you see in Hamilton.
Finally, though, after all these miracles that we just talked about, the biggest miracle of all was this. Remember, we're asking ourselves the question, was it in Washington's best interest to leave his home and fight in the Revolution and then become the president of the United States of America? Well, it could have been, because that's a lot of power and a lot of opportunity to make a lot of money. But instead, he chose to give power up and to walk away from it. He willingly gave up his power as commander-in-chief of the entire American army. And then again, he willingly stepped down as president after 2 terms. At the time, there wasn't an amendment to stop him from running again, so he could have done it, but he chose to step down and go back home to Mount Vernon. Throughout all of history, I can't think of another man or woman that had that much power over an army and a country that willingly gave it up, but George Washington did. He went back home to his beloved Mount Vernon.
You've shared a quote before about what that meant to other people when they saw that he gave up power.
Yeah, that was a quote by King George III. And the king said about George Washington, if he does that, as in walk away from power, he will be the greatest man in the world.
That just stuck out last time you shared it. I remembered that because walking away from power is nothing I want to do. So sometimes I give power to the iPad for my children. That's it, though. That's as far as I go.
Well, that would be so hard because you always make excuses of why you're important. You get used to a job or responsibility or authority, and you are maybe doing something really well. And then it's so hard to walk away from it because you think, oh, well, I'm really good at this and I'm helping so many people.
I think that would be the harder part, knowing that you're doing the job with your heart in the right place, to then let someone else take that power because someone else does step in. But how do you know if they're going to have the same heart and the same intention?
I think it's the biggest miracle is that he was able to do that. He understood what we were trying to create, and that's where his heart was. I know that George Washington wasn't perfect, but he knew the United States became a country because of God. Washington wrote in a letter, "The hand of providence has been so conspicuous in all of this that he must be worse than an infidel that lacks faith and more than wicked that has not gratitude enough to acknowledge his obligations. This month, let's thank God and show him gratitude for his divine protection and the blessings that he has given us. If we want to continue in peace and prosperity, we need to turn to God and remember his gracious hand. It's always in our best interest to stand up for our Creator, our King, and our Savior. He is always there, waiting for us to ask for his divine hand to lead and guide us." This is our prayer.
From Sydney and Sher.